Hey everyone, Howard Gearhauser here alongside my dad, Dr. Richard Gearhauser. In today's video, we have a really interesting topic, and this is how we actually download information from the sun. So there's new evidence and research showing that we actually absorb information from the sun itself, as does a lot of the animal and plant life here on Earth. So I know that this is something that you've been studying, Dad. Can you give us a little more background on what's going on here?
Well, as you know, if you've been listening to us, we're big believers in getting natural sunlight, and it just makes sense that the physics of light and the physics of the sun and cosmology is really complex, and so there's a lot of things that we don't know, and they could be important, and that's why I'm a believer in not depending on man-made light uh, for health benefits. We see all kinds of light therapies today. We see the light boxes, blue light for depression. We shine ultraviolet light on skin lesions. Dermatologists do this. We get in tanning beds. And of course, we have the lights of all of our tech devices and the lights inside our houses. And nowadays, we've kind of converted those lights into LEDs and compact fluorescents because they save some energy. But there's a lot of evidence that these light frequencies cause problems. So we're a big fan of the real thing, the sun. And as another minor component of light, maybe the moon and maybe reflected light and light of the stars. All these things could be critically important. A lot of this is theory, but we know that animal physiology and plant physiology need tremendous amounts of information to control the trillions of reactions, of feedback loops and all these different things that are occurring trillions of times a second in each one of us. An amazing amount of information is needed. So mankind, we think we're so smart. We develop these wireless technologies and all these things, and we think we're so smart, and we think we can maybe outsmart the sun. We don't need the sun. We can turn on our light box.
Right. And it seems like, especially nowadays, there's so much research done on the sun. So we're learning more and more and more, which, when you think about these other products that maybe took some time to develop, they haven't even considered any of this new research. So as you mentioned, it's not the same thing as just getting out in the sun. And I'm sure there's a lot more we'll continue to learn about the sun as we move forward. So one interesting thing that I know has come across the research that you've been doing is that the sun seems to almost take a breath, which changes the energy and the information coming off of the sun. Can you explain what's going on there?
As well, the sun, has, you can break it down into its spectrum. And so that's the rainbow. Basically, when you put the sun's light through a prism, it divides the sun's frequencies into a spectrum of light. So one of the things that we've learned about the spectrum of light when you do this, and this was actually something that occurred a long time ago. An optician in Germany, Fraunhofer, he noticed when he divided light into a spectrum that these dark lines were embedded in the various colors. And I think we can pull this up. So you can see here's the spectrum of visible light, and it goes from the violet, which is the highest frequency, which is the smallest wavelength, and down to the bottom there are the longer wavelengths, and that goes into the red, and then at the very bottom is infrared. So from violet to blue to green to yellow to orange to red, and then to infrared. So if you notice here, there are black lines, vertical black lines kind of spread across the spectrum of visible light. Well, you may notice this looks like a barcode. Okay. What are barcodes? Well, barcodes are something that's on every single thing we buy nowadays. We think it's kind of a miracle that every store, every firm, every package you sent, now a barcode gives us all the information. Let's say if you're sending a package to Anchorage, Alaska, if you don't have the barcode on it, it's going to wind up in the wrong place. So humans were really smart. We created these barcodes that it looks like are being used by nature. Are used by nature from the very beginning. So we're really not so smart. Or yeah, maybe we are smart. We figure things out. We think we came up with it, but no, nature came up with it, the barcode. So as you saw those dark lines, well, what happens as the sun takes a breath, and this happens about every 5 minutes, that this frequency of light moves, and those Fraunhofer lines, the dark lines, also move as the sun respires. So could this be kind of one of the magical sources of information for life? Okay, so life has always been exposed to these. What causes these Fraunhofer lines? The Fraunhofer lines are the light that's been absorbed by something. As that light passes through from the sun, then the dark line is where something absorbed that particular frequency. So that, let's say, hydrogen. The hydrogen in the atmosphere of the sun might absorb a certain frequency, and then that frequency doesn't make it to Earth, so it shows up as a Fraunhofer line. Well, guess what? We're loaded with hydrogen, and this resonance between hydrogen and us through these spectral lines are thought, and again, this is theory, but it makes sense that if we look at barcodes, how they can transmit so much information, and here nature's doing the same thing. It looks almost identical, a thicker line, a thinner line, just like the barcodes man has made. It's likely this is giving us a lot of information, and we have trillions of chemical reactions every second in our cells. In each cell, we have 37 trillion cells. So if you think about the number of chemical reactions that happen that need to be controlled with information, this is a mechanism that can handle a huge amount of information for all of life, plants, animals, and everything in between.
Yeah, like you said, it's vastly complex, and the amount of information that can be stored in this spectrum of light seems pretty amazing, considering, like you said, trillions of chemical reactions going on throughout our body at one time. You're going to need something that can handle that type of information. So what can we do with this information ourselves? What would you recommend that we start leveraging in our day-to-day lives?
And this gets me back to the problem with the man-made light frequencies is they don't have these Fraunhofer lines, and they're not the same frequency that's constantly breathing like comes from the sun. Now, we don't know for sure how important this is with, all the complex mechanisms that are going on, but it's likely very important. And it, to me, might be one of the major reasons that we have a disease epidemic that's just exploding beyond comprehension. I was just reading something today where millennials now, their health is like 40% worse than the generation right before them. So these things, our younger people are getting sicker, and our older people are getting sicker too. So everyone's getting sicker. So what could it be? Well, we're all under artificial light. We're all indoors hiding from the sun. Mainstream medicine tells us to wear sunscreen, tells us to stay out of the sun. They tell us to wear glasses that block 100% of the UV light. All these different things that we're being told and that we believe, and then that we just automatically do. We just accept that these LED lights and the compact fluorescent lights that use less energy, which is good for the planet in a way, but if it kills us off, it's probably not so good. So this would bring me to say it's really critically important for us as individuals and us as a society and mankind to get back out in the sun that we've always been in. So ancient people, they didn't live as long because they didn't, technology is not always bad. Technology led to antibiotics, and technology led to sanitation practices that allows us to have so many people that don't die off as children. We have done a lot of amazing things, but I think we're now overshooting. But these ancient peoples didn't have these diseases that we have now. They didn't have much cancer. They didn't have Alzheimer's disease at all. They didn't have heart attacks. They didn't have the autoimmune diseases at the levels where it's almost the new normal. Now, this is great for the drug companies because their profits just keep expanding as we get more and more people. Millennials now are being loaded with diseases, and the next generation coming up it's going to be worse. So it keeps getting worse. There's a way, and it's just at this point common sense. It's not something we can prove scientifically, but it's common sense. Get back out into Mother Nature's source of light, which is a huge source. Everything points to the sun with all of its frequencies and the Fraunhofer lines and the respiration that the sun's doing. All this points to an amazing amount of information that programs our subatomic particles. So it gets into quantum electrodynamic theory, which hasn't really made its inroads into biology or medicine much. I mean, this is exploding now, but it's relatively new. I mean, there have been physicists talking about, well, what is life? There was a book written by Schrodinger, a famous physicist, that said, what is life? And that life, the magic of life, is the quantum effects. So it's not and that book was written over 100 years ago. So it's not a new idea, but we're getting the hard science showing up, and that biophysics and quantum electrodynamic theory in physics is a big part of what life is. And it's probably the magic of life, of how it can need so much information to do what it does and still get the job done. Things like these Fraunhofer lines in the spectrum of light that hits us that are not present in our fake light.
And the other thing too, we do try to provide as much new research and scientific evidence as we can to support these ideas. The problem is if you wait for the research to start taking action and doing what just intuitively seems like common sense, like nature's probably good for us, sun exposure is probably good for us, this is how it's always been. It's been this modern paradigm of demonizing the sun. So if we can just get back to common sense, then we can use the scientific proof to justify it. But I would start taking action on that now, getting out in the sun, especially just knowing how complex this really is. And we can either choose to try and outsmart nature, which is what we're doing and doesn't seem to be working, or we can join nature and just be a part of it and be in harmony with it. And I think that is going to answer a lot of these problems because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we sign off?
Well, I think that getting back to your connection with nature is something that makes you happier too. So there's really not a reason to not do it. It makes you happier. It's something that intuitively we all feel good when we, see that sun and feel that sun. We all know that's good for us. There's no one I've ever met that says, oh, I don't like to feel the heat of the sun on a cold day, or I don't like to watch the sunrise over the ocean. Yeah, I've never heard a person not feel good and like that. So intuitively, we all know, but there's just interests in society that have pushed us in the wrong direction to where we've kind of hit the breaking point where I go out and I see that most people have been indoctrinated to really hide from the sun. Even though I think if you talk to them on an individual basis, which I've done a million times, yeah, you would get them to agree. Yeah, the sun is good. But my ophthalmologist told me always wear sunglasses that block 100% of UV. Well, UV is really important. Ultraviolet light is really important to get some of that in your eye. Now, am I saying stare at the sun 24/7? No. I'm saying be smart about it, but don't hide from it.
Exactly. So hopefully this video provided just some more evidence of the power of the sun and just how magical it truly is. So start getting more sun. Don't cover up from it. Don't hide from it. Become friendly with it. And I'm sure it'll benefit your health and your life in a number of ways. So this is a quick video today. We just thought we'd get this information out to you guys. And as always, make sure to check out the rest of our videos on the Quantum Possibility channel. And we'll see you on the next one.